Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Kings. This is a safe space for men. We pride ourselves in giving men a platform to discuss topics that range from being uplifting, empowering, motivating, and even uncomfortable, touching on topics that are not heavily promoted in our society. We believe in encouraging and empowering our men and giving men their rightful platform, which is key to our community's future. This is episode one of our very first season. So today I am super blessed to be in the presence of three amazing kings. We're going to start with you, Marlon. If you could introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Kenneth and Victor and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Marlon, as she said, from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm second oldest of five. I'm a 44-year-old black male, single father of a daughter of four, uh, retired Air Force, retired Air Force veteran. And I think that in regard to my past and what I grew up with, I've seen a lot of different perspectives that I think can contribute to what we're talking about today. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Kenneth?
I am Kenneth Bell. I live in North Wells, PA suburb, about 30 minutes north from Philadelphia. I'm a 14-year Army vet. Thank you for your service too as well, Marlon. I have a BA in Human Services with a focus on psychology and counseling. I spent over 10 years as a counselor doing individual counseling, group counseling, drug counseling, and relationship counseling. And my personal background is the youngest of six kids, single mother, growing up in the inner cities of Connecticut, dealing with the same struggles as everybody else.
Awesome. And now, Victor?
How you doing, everybody? I'm Victor Santiago. Once again, to Marlon and Ken, thank you both of you for your service. We appreciate all that you're doing, all that you've done to keep our country safe, as well as all of our servicemen and women. So thank you for that. From the Bronx, New York. I'm living in Newburgh. 25 years with the same woman, married very happily. Thank God. 5 beautiful children. I got a degree in theological studies and biblical studies, and a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks. That's about it.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for your service. And I'm so excited to have you guys on the platform. Thank you, Kings, for being here. So basically today, just so everybody knows, we are going to be talking about toxic mothers. It's something that is not really publicly put out there as much. It's always talking about toxic fathers and what the father isn't doing or how the father is lacking, yet women are never put on that same pedestal. So today's topic, I actually had to research it. So I researched it a little bit. I was looking for some pictures to put up, and to my amazement, I found no pictures depicting a toxic mother with her son. There was only pictures of toxic mothers with their daughters and everything like that, which showed me even more that there is a problem that we're not addressing as a society. So how do you kings feel about that when it comes to this topic and how it is publicized or not publicized today?
Well, I'll go ahead and say that I don't think this topic has been addressed much in society at all. Men have been painted, especially over the last 3 or 4 decades, men have been painted as villains by a lot of women, and unjustly so. And some men are villains, but a lot of men, personally, I know a lot of men, upstanding men, that went well beyond out of the way to be good fathers, but their children didn't find out till they sometimes become adults that, damn, I did have a good dad, but I didn't know that because my mother painted him as a villain or a toxic guy. I actually lived through that myself. And I don't mind sharing my personal experiences at all because I think it helps people. Like my father is an upstanding minister, man of God. He's a biblical scholar.
Awesome.
He and my mom probably never should have crossed paths ever in life, but they did. They stayed married for 14 years. They had 5 kids, but when their marriage departed, it was the messiest divorce I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
And all the toxicity came from there, where when you have children that are teenagers and they actually grow up with their dad and they have that personal interaction with a good father. And once that father, if you push a father out of that situation and then you spend years trying to brainwash your children that he's not a good person, and they personally had the experience with that person. But you personally, because you're bitter or upset about any of these adult issues that take place in your marriage that you have with this man, when you press your feelings upon children and make them hate their own parent, everything gets toxic at that point. And so I personally went through that. But for me personally, I didn't like. Some kids, they'll look at it and they'll become very impressionable about what their mother feels about their father, and they'll take on those same ideas. And some kids know better. The older kids will understand, you know what, I know what kind of father I have. I know she's angry at him. I can't allow myself to believe this stuff, But kids go through this battle a lot. I've seen other kids go through this battle a lot. And the truth doesn't normally get revealed to these kids until they're much older and become adults and they see the truth between both parents.
Right. I definitely do agree with you. And does anybody want to elaborate on that further, Kenneth or Victor?
Well, I think in society, someone has to be your hero and someone has to be the villain. And a lot of our cultural norms is mixed up in our politics. The politics of the other. Somebody got to be the bad guy. Somebody got to be good. Somebody got to be bad. So a lot of times, it's benefits other people to make sure that, people, there's always conflict because, they can justify their existence. Well, we got to protect you from this bad guy here. So, you need to reelect us. And we got to we need more police on the street. So, a lot of times it's societal norms. It's the non-traditional relationship roles that are going on now. Like I had this big discussion about modern women and how modern women want traditional men, but they don't want to have the traditional woman values. And so you have a lot of situations where, they're unrealistic expectations, like modern women or women want traditional men and they want everything that goes along with being in a relationship with a traditional man. But when it comes time to reciprocate and, give back, because nobody don't go into a relationship figuring that, that they're not going to get nothing out of a relationship, whether something they're expecting to get some out of, whether it be love, whether it be physical contact, whether it be affection, whether it just be having an opportunity to raise a family. But, you have people right now, these ideas are being drilled in people's head. They have these very unrealistic expectations of what they should get versus, what society is telling them that they should get versus in reality, what they're giving and what they get back in return. So yeah, you have a lot of toxic situations where I grew up in a household with a bunch of females. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and I was raised by my mother and my older sisters. And as a kid, sometimes you don't really understand like the relationship dynamics of the people around you. These are just the people that you love. So and then as you gradually get older, you start to understand like, wow, well, oh wow, I've seen my sisters in the reactions with their boyfriends, and and then you be like, oh wow. So you become more aware of these situations, and certain things that you think are normal are really abnormal, but you really don't understand these situations because you're young.
Right. I think that's really powerful. And Victor?
Great points by both gentlemen. When we talk about toxicity and we talk about these type of things, usually what I think why you didn't see anything on Google, Miana, when you try to find some pictures of toxic mothers with their sons is because, in society and culturally, when you talk about a female having a toxic mother because they're doing something in the forms of prostitution or they're stripping or they're doing all these type of things, and they say, well, they had a toxic relationship with their mother and they blame that on that toxic relationship. However, with men, with us, we say, well, they don't call it toxic mothers, they call it a mother issue, right? They never call it toxicity. They just said he has mother issues, he has mom issues. And that would lead to, men being, the infidelities of men and adulteries of men. But that is almost culturally accepted because, you know, it's almost like, well, they're men and men will be men, which is wrong, right? I mean, we all know that's wrong. And as Marlon said, and as Ken said, they grew up in large families, right? So in the contrast, I grew up as a single child, as the only child in the household. And although, you know, in the 70s, listen, let's face it, everybody was toxic in the 70s, right? So men, women, children, mothers, fathers, everybody was toxic. If you want to use that word toxic. But, you know, when I was growing up, you know, even with a mother that had some toxic behavior, because I wouldn't go as far as calling her toxic because that would speak to her character. And my mother is not toxic. My mother is my mother. And the Bible says to honor thy mother and thy father. And if you do so, you have long life. So I'm always going to honor my mother. I'm always going to honor the job she did as a single mother. Although some of her behaviors when I was growing up was definitely toxic. But even in that, when I'm walking down the street with my mother as a young lad, if our role as men is automatically to be protectors. That's in our DNA from a very young age. We're protectors, especially of our mother, no matter what toxic the situation is. So I think the reason why we don't see that often, it's not talked about often, because it's just not, we're just not built that way in our DNA to say, well, I have these kind of behaviors because of my toxic mother or the relationship with my mother, because that's just, to me, basically an excuse. Because no mother, no matter what, listen, mothers do the best job in the world, especially single mothers, right? I mean, I think you know that very well. So, I mean, when we talk about culturally and we talk about why we don't see much of it, I think it's because it's just not publicized as much as with women that have toxic relationships with their mothers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely do agree. And one of the things that I feel like that you said that is very powerful is how boys that grow into men always want to protect their mother. So what I've seen in like one of my friends, he grew up with a very toxic mother, you know, who had him involved with a lot of different things, even watching her, you know, use drugs and different things like that. He ended up growing up. So this is why I do feel like it does affect the development of men, because he ended up growing up and every single woman that he was picking to be with was all toxic and like splitting images of his mother. And he didn't realize that until we met. And I said that to him. I said, hey, like, you know, like, do you realize that you love your mother? Like, even though he would say stuff like, oh, I hate my mom, you love your mother so much that you're picking women just like her.
Well, I think most people, when they hear the word toxic, they don't understand what the term, when you're dealing with a person's personality, what the term toxic really means. It just really means off balance. Like, in order for you to be a healthy, mentally healthy person, there has to be balance in your life. And I think society-wise, they're pushing this narrative that, you know, women don't need men, but what you don't understand is that we're supposed to be the counterbalance to each other. You know, my strength and my logic and my stability is supposed to be the counterbalance to my wife's nurturing and caring and loving personality. But what happens is that we don't have that balance in our relationship roles in a way, because 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was that balance, you know, and the struggle, you know, in families, people had that struggle together, but you had the mother and you had the father. And they used to be able to, you know, the father was able to go out and work and provide a living for the family. And then the mother would stay at home and the mother would nurture the kids. And then once the kids got to a certain age, especially young boys, the father would take over and teach them how to be men. So what's happening is that, you know, you have the father, the male role model that's removed from the home, and you have the woman who's taking on two roles and trying to do a role that she wasn't naturally designed to do. And she's giving her best animation, her best guesstimation of what this role should be. And she's doing it with emotions. And 9 times out of 10, when you do anything, when you're emotional, you're going to make the wrong decision. So, you know, the things may be overdid or overdone, and then you have a toxic situation because there's no balance. There's no man there to protect the wife from her children and to set those boundaries and to set those guidelines so that she could be what God intended her to be, what her natural role is. And I'm not saying I'm using that as a generalization because every woman is not the same. Everybody has their own personalities, but
Right.
in general, in nature, everybody has their role.
Mhm.
And so, people are toxic because they just don't have no balance. And like I know from coming from a household and a single mother household, I really didn't learn how to be a man until I was around other men, and being around strong male role models. My brother was, and then joining the military, being around even more male strong role models, I learned what it was, how to be a man, how, sometimes just my presence is enough to where I don't even need to say anything. Whereas, when my kids want to argue with their mother and it's an argument up and down, and then I say, well, go do what your mother says, and they go do it. And she's like, well, they listen to you, they don't listen to me. I said, well, that's my job for them to listen to me. And that's their job for them to love you. You're teaching them how to treat their woman, how to be loving and nurturing and kind. And not saying that men can't be that, but that's not our nature. It's not inherent to us. That's something that we have to be learned. That's something that we have to be taught because it's not in our nature. In the way you have some women who have to learn how to be more calculative. That's something that they have to be taught too as well, more disciplined. That's something they have to be taught as well. Not saying that women are disciplined, but it's just two different energies and people don't understand that. So you have situations where, people just off balance. We use the word toxic, but it's really off balance, off center.
I think that's a good perspective. And I want to say, first, Victor, what you clarified earlier about the fact that you were able to distinguish the fact that, number one, you are supposed to love your mother regardless. And that's how I was raised as well. But you don't always love the behavior, especially if it's off balance or toxic. I was able to understand that growing up as well. It's things I saw in my mother's time. It's things I saw in women around me. I grew up around more women than men. Growing up, I saw women who wanted to be the husband and the wife. They wanted to control everything. And they didn't care how the kids, what they showed us in front of us as kids. They didn't care what they exposed us to. They were going to run that household, whether a man was there or not. That's just how it was. Right. I think that's off balance and toxic. I think we could all kind of agree with that. But to Mayana's point, you were talking about your friend who, until he met you, he did not know that he was dating women that was a direct reflection of his mother and the bad things he experienced with his mother. I wanted to touch on that point because in my personal experience, I accepted the good and the bad. I knew right from wrong by the time I was 5. Just growing up in the environment I grew up in. I knew how humans are supposed to treat each other generally. I think that most people on this earth, you learn most of your most precious life lessons when you're 5 years old. You learn how to treat people right, to accept differences, how to behave in public, how to behave at home. You get taught all these fundamental things when you're 5, and throughout your life, isn't it ironic how as adults you got to go to counseling to relearn the same stuff you were taught when you were 5?
Right.
It's crazy, but it's true. But to your point, from my personal perspective, dating in my life, I've divorced 3 women. I've divorced 3 women in my life. I'm 44. Because all the toxicity that I saw from women growing up, I wasn't going to allow myself to spend decades with somebody who had no business being it. Mm-hmm. I just had a zero tolerance towards, I knew how I needed to be treated. And I didn't care about the public stigma and the jokes I got from other people. Oh, you can't stay married, blah, 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 blah. No, I can't settle. And now that I'm a dad, I'm extra careful about the people I bring around my daughter because I know when you put somebody else in your space, if you don't take the time to understand their viewpoints, how they approach life, how they view these imbalances we're talking about here today and stuff like that, you're not careful, you're going to have people whispering into your child's ear things that you don't approve of. Right. I just think for me, by the time I was 20 years old, instead of dating people who were a lot like my mom, I was the opposite, a lot like the women I saw that were toxic growing up. By the time I was a young adult, I knew exactly what I didn't want because I knew what I've been around for so many years. So it kind of helped guide me in that direction in a positive light, so to speak. helped me develop standards as a young man because I had already seen the worst of the worst.
Right.
It-
Yeah.
Yeah, to touch on that, Marlon, you made a great point. You know, when I've been married for almost 20 years, and me and my wife, we've been together for for over 23 years.
Congrats.
And my wife is the exact opposite personality of the female role models that I had growing up. The exact same opposite. I think one of the benefits of growing up in a household full of women is that you get a chance to see it, you grow up in it, and you learn very quickly. The smart ones do. You learn very quickly what you don't want. And the funny part about it is that, you know, my sisters sometimes have a lot to say about my wife, how she's so submissive and she's so timid, and my wife, she just sits there and she laugh at them, and she just says, no, I know how to, you know, everything ain't got to be no argument.
Right.
And if I want him to be one way as a man, then that comes with certain expectations on my end. So, you know, I used to hate that my wife didn't argue with me a lot when we first started dating. But as the years rolled by, I kind of she spit some game on me. She spit some real game on me. Like, I want to be with you, and I ain't gonna sit here and argue with you. And over time, you know, I think a lot of women don't understand, like, when you're trying to have a man in your life, a masculine male who meets the definition of a man, not because being a male and being a man is two different things. Being a male is your gender. Being a man is a standard. And when you want those type of people in your life, when you have a certain picture in your head, expectation, that comes with certain expectations on my end. Like, a lot of people talk about how a woman, oh, well, why I gotta be submissive? Why is a woman I gotta be submissive? And what they don't understand is being submissive. A woman's gonna be submissive. My wife is submissive to my leadership, and she's submissive to my judgment. And I'm submissive to her her needs, her feelings, and her desire to be safe and secure. But people who are in healthy relationship, balanced relationship, understand that. And there's so many people on either side trying to take these definitions and they go from them, and they're not really correlating to what it is. My wife can get more out of me with her feminine side, coming to me, talking to me softly, than to try to be masculine any day. Because now I'm not looking at you as my woman. I'm looking at you like a man. Oh, you want to challenge me? So now you challenge me as a man, and then it's going to be that conflict. But if you come to me with that feminine side, and I may say, let me think about it. I may be dead set against it, but she's giving me a perspective that I need, because as a balance, I need to be balanced. Because sometimes I can be too hard. Sometimes I can be too logical. Sometimes I can be too calculative. And she'll be like, well, this is how I feel. And she breaks it down to me. And then I might be dead set against it, but as I think about it, I'll be like, she has a point.
Right. And I think that's also one thing that can be, like Marlon said, that can be very toxic, is when a woman is, you know, taking on so much masculine energy, because that's going to raise boys that think women should be like that, and not like Amozia, that women should be like that. So let me tell everybody signs of a toxic mother. So that's going to be blaming. There's a lot of blaming, lack of empathy or understanding, exploitation, negativity, and poor boundaries are some examples. Is any of those things, like, do they resonate with any of you guys? As do you know examples of have you ever seen examples of women that were like that, or mothers?
Can you read those again one more time, if you don't mind me asking?
So the signs are going to be blaming, lack of empathy and understanding, exploitation, negativity, and poor boundaries.
Absolutely.
Well, absolutely. I think that if all those are traits, and I think I've seen and experienced those from friends, from family members, I've witnessed all of that, and I can honestly say that if you're going to be, we're talking about toxic mothers here, so we can't not talk about how children respond to all these different toxic traits. If you're showing the lack of accountability as a mother, you're not establishing boundaries around your relationship wise, your kids are going to see that. And a lot of the times the children follow suit when they become adults. If you don't have compassion enough to be empathetic towards your children when they're going through things, or empathetic in your relationship that you're displaying in front of your child, your children watch everything. They're sponges.
Right.
Everything you do around them, they soak it up, and it may not make sense to them when they're 10, but they digest it differently when they're 15, 16, 17 years old, when they're developing their own personalities and things like that. So, I really feel like all those traits do apply. And I've seen far too many cases where the relationships that mothers have with men that maybe should not be in their life, maybe they invited toxic men into their life, and that's helped them with their toxicity or their imbalances that they have. You invite people into your life, into your children's life, and you put on full display all these traits that you just mentioned, and your kids have a front row seat to this stuff. What kind of positive expectations can you have for your, as far as the development of your kid, for them to turn out to be good, well-being, functioning adults after being in an environment that you put them in like that?
Right.
I think one of the big things is that, go ahead, Victor. I'll wait.
Yeah, I'll touch on this one because it's a very, very interesting topic as far as I'm concerned, this particular question, because when we talk about, the children that are involved in, with toxic mothers. Listen, I'm a realist, right? And I believe in being accountable, right? So being accountable for my own actions, and quite honestly for the reactions that come as a result of my actions. So, just a quick story. Listen, I have 5 children of my own. My wife and I have 5 children. And like I said, I was an only child. We have a big family, but at one point in time, somebody would call my wife at that time that when we did separate toxic, right? Because because of it seemed as if, and it was portrayed as if she would blame me for a lot of the things that was going on within our family. However, I had to take a step back and take a self-introspection and look and say, well, was my behavior the cause of the toxic behavior that everybody thought my wife was exhibiting, right? And then I have to take a step back and say, you know what? If I wouldn't have acted a certain way, right, then we wouldn't have this toxic. The children see that toxic relationship. The children's mom is being quote unquote toxic, and then as my mother, who fence and say, okay, well, your mother's this and your mother's that. That's why we have outside influences, whether they're grandparents or not, portray their mother, right? So because the children take that and now they're forced to choose a side. That we don't want to happen is for children to choose a side. So, when we talk about why are they toxic and the impact on children, I would say to all the, look at yourself in the mirror and see if you have anything to do with the reason why, quote unquote, toxic or exhibiting toxic behavior. Because many times both of our behavior, it's not just one person. It takes 2 to tango. Right. So we take down together, and now you got to raise your children together. Whether you're going to be doing it in one house, we have to be accountable, and I think we all have to be accountable before we can label somebody else toxic. Right. And as Marlon said, really and protect them from certain toxicities, protect them from certain behavior to be just as toxic. Children mimic what they see. Tell them what to do, and they won't do it. If they see you do it, they're going to do it, right?
Vincent.
And more fathers, especially young sons, they mimic their father.
Yeah.
And then young women, they look for their father for, they call them daddy's little girl. So, how you treat your wife, that could turn toxic for your daughter, because she'll think that that's a normal behavior. So that's a very, very great question. And I just need to speak on that one.
Well, I'm gonna elaborate on something that you said, right? And I'm gonna carry on to that. And when you're talking about accountability, right, and personal accountability, but one side of accountability isn't accountability; it's blame. So you can only have accountability if both people involved in the situation are gonna have a candid and honest conversation about their actions and how their actions are affecting one another. I can try to have all the accountability in the world for myself and my actions, and if my wife is not having the own same level of accountability as her own, the power interaction is that it's still going to be dwarfed, and it's still going to create other toxic situations, because you're going to feel as though, hey, listen, I'm putting all this energy into the situation to try to resolve the situation, and you're not putting the same amount of energy. It's going to create bitterness. So I think that's one thing that people need to realize. Once again, one-sided accountability is not accountability, it's blame. Now, another thing I see is the lack of boundaries, and that's something that you touched on. A lot of situations happen that way, and I had to have some candid and honest conversations early on in my relationship with my wife, with her family and my family. And a lot of people think because they have the ability to do something, I have the ability to go out and yell at the top of my lungs down the street, doesn't mean that I have the right to do something. You know what I'm saying? Just because I have the ability, if I see something and I don't like something in any of my family members' relationships, right, or what they're doing, just because I have the ability to speak on it doesn't mean that it's my place or it's my right to speak on it. And that's where the natural boundaries come in. A lot of times people feel as though, well, that's my niece and that's my sister and that's my mother, but you're not the person in that relationship. Or, that's your friend, but if a man is talking to his ex about his son, and then you feel as though you have a right to come into that situation when you're not the parents of either child, that's a big problem across the board, is the lack of natural boundaries that people feel as though because they have the ability to do something when they really don't have the right to do something. And when people learn healthy boundaries, learn to, sometimes I don't interject in any of my nieces or any of my family members' personal affairs unless they ask me to. Because, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I apologize for interrupting. I'm gonna let you finish.
No. But I don't interject unless they ask me to, because I have learned that often, right? This is a lesson that I learned. My sister, when I was at a young age, used to get in the fights with her boyfriend all the time. So I used to call myself going to be the hero, going and save him, interjecting myself into their relationship. And then 2 weeks later, they're back in that relationship. And then I'm here looking like a fool. You have to learn sometimes to sit back and be patient and to let people experience whatever they're going to experience. But people need to go through these processes themselves. But what happens is that a lot of people don't have the coping skills or the communication skills or the conflict resolution skills. So when we talk to one another, we may talk to each other in a very animated way. And so people think that that's normal. You might grow up in a household where there's a lot of cussing, or you might grow up in a household where there's a lot of breaking items. And that's one thing that you learn in counseling. There is no such thing as a normal couple. People have their own norms. People have to do what's functional for them. I know a couple that's been married for 50 years, and the way you hear them talk about each other, it's crazy. But that's their relationship.
Right.
You better not talk about them like that.
Right.
You're gonna get that fire, but that's their relationship, and that's something that you learn. Everybody have their norms.
Right.
But people nowadays just feel as though because they have the ability to say something, it doesn't mean that they have the right to say something.
Kenneth, I just wanted to piggyback off what you said, and before doing that, just point out that you and Victor, I applaud you guys because you guys, through ups and downs, has found a way to maintain a steady marriage for well over a decade and just keep going, because I know it's challenging the way this world is today.
There's a lot of help, brother.
There's a lot of help, but y'all still here. And the environments that your kids are growing up in, let's look at it for a minute. Your kids are growing up in an environment where the values of both of their parents are pretty damn similar. Like, you and your wife have pretty similar values. Y'all wouldn't be together right now if y'all didn't have similar values. That goes for you and Victor. I say that to say this. We all know that in society today, most children are growing up with single parents. Your kids are your kids are in a valuable position to get nurturing from both parents and have that type of balance from both parents. And a lot of kids out here don't have that at all. So what do you have? You have a lot of people that are rushing into having kids, and they're having kids with people that don't have the same value system that they have at the beginning, while they're out here dating and doing whatever they want to do. And all of a sudden we got a baby. And now we got a baby, and I'm finding out that you don't believe in the same things I do. You don't operate the same way I do. You don't even value kids like I do. And I see that all over the place. Mm-hmm. Well, we're talking about family, friends, or whatever. And then you have two people trying to co-parent with different value systems. And sometimes, because of situations like that, that introduces some toxicity itself. You have to have two adults, two different backgrounds that are not married, trying to come up with a way to teach, to get on the same page value-wise, while they're trying to live their own life. They're trying to raise kids and make sure they got similar values so they can teach that. I'm going through that now. I am going through that now. I'm blessed that my daughter's mom does have similar values, but we went through some hell too. I had to fight for my custody. My child was taken from me in a certain sense, and I had to actually get out and fight for custody because I want to be a present dad. A lot of men don't do that. I say all that because that's the norm in today's society. There's going to be one parent there most of the time. Another parent's going to be gone. And and sadly, in most cases, it's the single mother that's raising those kids these days.
Right. And we're actually, not to cut you off, but we're going to elaborate. So I want you to hold that. We're actually going to start transitioning into talking about baby mothers and toxic baby mothers. Before we do that, we have an audience question from Ariana. I hope I said your name correctly. Ariana. Okay. So what do you think is your toxic trait as an adult based on your childhood experience that you learned from your mother? So what is a toxic trait that you have as an adult that is based on your childhood experience that you learned from your mother? That's an awesome question, Brianna. That's an awesome question.
Who wants to take a stab at this?
Yeah, everybody can take a stab at that in the real quick position. Amazing question.
Well, I think the toxic trait I learned from my mother is exposure. Whatever you do as an adult, I think that if you're not mindful, like if you're not mindful of what you're exposing your kids to, you can be judged. You'll be looked at differently by your own kids. If you're exposing things to your kids, such as being a loose cannon emotionally, or you're exposing things like adultery and making adultery and things like that seem normal in front of your child, or things like that, it can have an adverse effect, especially if you have multiple kids. None of your kids are going to see every situation the same way. They'll all turn out differently. But one thing they will have in common is they will never view you with high moral character, as you grow older. I can elaborate on that for 30 minutes, but I'm going to let the other brothers speak.
I think it's something I got better at. I think something that I learned, unbalanced trait that I learned from my mother is at times being emotionally withdrawn. I'm very, and that could be just a combination of how I grew up in the military. I can compartmentalize, and certain times I'm not feeling the empathy. Certain time, you know, for me, life is just black and white, and it just is what it is. And sometimes it works for me, and sometimes it doesn't work for me. And sometimes I just have to back off and take a step back and try to have consideration, because I realize that, you know, the way I see the world, people don't see the world the same way that I see the world. You know, so yeah, just kind of being at times emotionally withdrawn or compartmentalized. I can say I learned that.
Okay. And how about you, Victor? Okay, so while Victor is coming back to us soon, I just wanted to give you guys a quick, like, if you're thinking like, hey, do I have a toxic mother? You know, you might be a woman watching, and hey, you want to start knowing about the traits. I'm gonna basically give a little bit more detailed traits before we transition into toxic baby mamas. Okay, so some more traits of toxic mothers. It'll be some repetitive. Is she overreacts to the differences of opinion? She makes excessive demands on you. She uses manipulation to get what she wants. She fails to respect your boundaries. She puts down your accomplishments. She hurts you with her words or actions. She refuses to apologize. She tries to control you, and she lacks empathy. So if any of you kings are out there and you're listening and you see traits like this in your mother, you know, maybe this is the live where you're sitting there and you're like, wow, this is something that I've actually experienced. You know, basically, so just find ways. We're going to talk about ways of coping with that and ways of, you know, basically developing into a better man towards the end of the show. But Victor.
Hey, Brianna, can you hear me? I lost connection for a minute.
Oh yeah, it's
We can
okay.
hear you, can't see you.
Oh yeah, we can't see you.
Yeah, I got my video on, but I mean, I'll just answer that question. I believe the question was, what was the trait? What was the trait we picked up as an adult on your childhood experience that you learned from your mother? I'm gonna tell you quite honestly, and my wife is watching. I know she's watching, so she might comment on it. I complain an awful lot. Like, I complain an awful lot. I'll be honest. Like, and I say I don't in the house. I'm not complaining. I'm just bringing up a fact. But that's because that's what my mother, she still does. She complains. But I can just go back to boundaries for just 1 second, right? That was a major issue. A lot of times between my wife and I was the boundaries that set my mother and I concerning my. It was like, well, you guys should do it this way. You guys should. There are boundaries. I just wanted to touch on that real quick. But the one trait I know that I picked up from her is the art of complaining. And then she goes like there. She just commented. I just see it right there. The art of complaining, right? And I do it. I have an art. I'm an artiste at it because I can do it, without really making it seem like complaining.
Right. No, definitely. That was really cute. His wife is in the. Yeah, it seems like you're going in and out. Yeah, no, he definitely is owning it. And that's one of the greatest things that you can do is own something that is a flaw of yours and recognizing that. Like, once you
I'm still in my office at work, and sometimes a little.
I think just in general with this whole red flag thing, that we as people, we've lost the ability to work with each other's flaws. And I truly believe that, because for you to say, my own personal opinion, if the biggest red flag that you should be looking for first is your own. So the whole term is, red flags, red flags, red flags, to give people a sense of, I'm perfect and I got to be looking out for all these traits and this, that, and the third. But you come with your own flaws. You come with your own red flags. So, when you have these abilities, when you learn that you're flawed and you can accept other people's flaws. And I don't look for people, even if I was single, I wouldn't look for no person who was flawed, because there's no such person. I look at a person where the good outweighs the bad.
Wow. That definitely is very powerful. It's huge. Just like Angie said. So now let's transfer over to talking about co-parenting with a toxic mother, which is a really, really big issue. A lot of men go through really, really great fathers end up going through a system that is not set up for them. What is it? So yeah, we'll talk about different traits and stuff like that. One thing that I have to say with me being a female on the panel, the only female on the panel, is one of the things that I had to recognize in myself. It wasn't about being a toxic mother, but when you go into a system and you're going through a divorce and you have to figure out
Right.
the system is setting you up to where he only sees the kids every other weekend or maybe like 2 nights out of the week, and we accept that as women. We're like, okay, cool, you're only going to see them during that time, and we don't think nothing of it. It took me a couple of years to sit there and think to myself and be like, wait a second, this is toxic. Like, they should see their father equally. And you may not be thinking to yourself like you're a toxic mom, but that's something you have to consider. Those things, and you have to consider all aspects, the father's as well as yours, even if it's uncomfortable.
I think to add to that, I can just share my personal experience. I retired from the Air Force after 22 years with a newborn, but the relationship had went south. I took it upon myself to make sure that I was going to transition here to Florida, where I'm at, but I also want to help her transition down here, help her get on her feet, and then after going through that whole process, come together and try to figure out how we're going to co-parent in the best possible means as possible. Well, it didn't always turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out. The things I saw in her character at the time that didn't match up to the person I knew and I used to be married to, as far as like trying to control how much time I can spend with my daughter, trying to make demands for child support when I was actually overly supporting already, being as supportive as I possibly could, and going through all that type of stuff, all because she was upset that we wasn't together. So the beautiful thing about this is there's other groups I follow on Facebook, very encouraging groups, and I see guys that they put content out there like they're upset with their baby mom and they don't never get a chance to see their kids, and these guys don't even fight. They don't even know they have rights. They get into the system, or they'll get subpoenaed, or they'll get served with paperwork for child support, and they'll get depressed behind it, and they think about their finances. Oh, I can't afford a lawyer. It's not worth going through this fight. Let me just give her what she wants. And I see that in most of the cases. Let me give her what she wants so the drama will stop and I can just get on with my life. I think as a father, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your child to be there. And even though sometimes you can see the ignorance in some of these women, you can see what they're doing, trying to control the narrative and trying to control how much time you can spend with them. Truth being told, you both laid there and had that baby. You both got equal rights. And in my case in particular, the most refreshing part about it is by the time I got in front of a judge and did everything I needed to do as a man, I didn't have to say a thing. The judge said it all for me.
Wow.
He had to tell. When I sat there and the judge just talked to her and looked at her with a straight face and said, I've read all the documentation. I see what you're doing.
Right.
You can't control this. He has just as much rights as you do. Let him be a dad.
Right.
And a lot of men, they probably start crying if they go through it and they finally get a result like that.
Right.
But it's achievable. And no matter what toxicity you see out of a baby mother or what you got to go through, you may have to go through more. You may have to pay more.
Right.
You may go back child support. At the end of the day, longevity-wise, who's going to benefit from the child?
And I think that's one of the most important things when dealing with a toxic baby mother is definitely take her to court. Basically, let her, just like women do, let her hold a certain standard when it comes to the children, because she's going to have to follow those rules. If she doesn't, she can get in trouble. So it's better than dealing with somebody who is sporadic. Go to court. I encourage all men, baby mothers, go to court.
I want to add one more thing to that. One thing that helped me because I was really caught off guard when I was hit with it, with that whole situation. And by the way, me and my ex-wife, my daughter's mom now, have an amazing co-parent situation. Like we're amazing co-parents now, but we had to get on the same page, and we had to go through court and fighting each other to get there. But I will say that for anybody that's watching this podcast, whether it's women that's watching this podcast that have brothers or uncles that go through a situation like that, or men watching this podcast that's probably going through the same thing, what helped me was there's a old lawyer that used to serve in the Air Force for 30 years. He was a JAG, and y'all know what JAG is. It's basically that's your judicial lawyers that you have in the military. He wrote something called the Custody Bible for Men. And a lot of times with men, when you go to court like that, you're scared. You don't know the law. Everybody's told you that the court system is against you as a single father, and it is. But there's a lot of things you can do to get educated and get yourself prepared to go through that type of fight. And it's only like 110 pages, a PDF. But it armed me. Before I started going through that thing, I read that twice, and I was like, okay, I got enough encouragement. I'm ready to go through it. And I share that with a lot of men that's going through that because they need it. If you don't get educated and know what to expect and know what these certain hearings are, know how to bring a child support case and a custody case all in front of one judge, because that's two different courts.
Right, it is.
Cost more money to bring both of those in front of one judge. Like, to get educated on that stuff, I send that to people all the time. So if there's anybody on the podcast need that, I'll email it to you.
Awesome.
Very important what he said about about the co-parenting and being able to co-parent, act amicably. I was the product of a divorced household, and as many of us are or were, and what happened is it pins one against the other. And I mentioned it earlier, we never want our children to have to go through that, where we have to choose one or the other, or say, mom is better than dad or dad is better than mom. We don't want our parenting to become a competition, because it's not a competition. It's something that we should be doing together as a unit. And even we don't have to love one another. We don't have to even get along, but we have to put on a positive front for the children, because that's what ultimately is more important. And when you talk about toxic baby mamas, and there can be toxic baby fathers too. I mean, let's keep it real, right? And some fathers just don't want to be, and the ones that want to be, like Marlon said, the mothers have to allow them to be that, because there are a lot of fathers that want to be that. There are a lot of fathers that want to be in the child's life, and there are a lot of fathers that want to be, they don't want to be just weekend fathers. They want to see them whenever they can. And there are some instances, and we see it all the time, especially on social media, because that's what we do now. We post everything on social media, and we make it everybody's business. And we see the drama between a mother and a father and the child in the middle. And it just saddens me when that happens. It really saddens me to see a child in the middle. It's just we're supposed to uplift and raise our children together, and not necessarily in the same household. If that's not what's happening with you and your baby's mom or whatever, but together in the sense of that we got to be on one accord when it comes to the children. We just can't be at odds, and definitely can't let it be about money. Let the money work out itself. Let the courts, like Marlon and Miana say, let the courts work that part out. And then, as a father, who has to pay child support, go ahead and honor that commitment. I mean, because ultimately it's for your child. And what we also see on social media, and I hear it all the time, well, it's child support, and the mom is going to get her nails done. Listen, that's not what we should be concerned about, right? We should be concerned about we're doing what the court has mandated. And when I have time with my child, I'm not going to talk about the mother. I'm going to spend time with my child. And that's where it has to go. We have to stop talking about one another to our children in a negative light, especially parents that are not together.
I haven't experienced toxic baby mamas because I only got one, and I've been with her forever. So I don't. But I do have male family members and friends, and I have a good friend of mine. We talk on a regular about his baby mother, which he generally dislikes her. Like, I could say hates. But if she calls him for anything, like a car breaks down or something broken, he goes and he does it.
Wow.
listen, don't say nothing to me. Don't talk to me. Where's it at? He goes and does it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, she want to say thank you, whatever. He like save it and keep it pushing. And I think a lot of times with men, right, and this is just speaking from my perspective, my background in counseling and working with men and having nephews and especially when I talk to my nephew about his situation. You go into court, you're protecting your right, but you're also protecting the child's right to see you, to be involved in your life, and for you to have an influence. And I think, as a father, right, I'll be damned if any other male on this planet is going to have more influence on my children while they're young than me. And people may say, well, whatever, or this and the third. No, you're not. Nobody's not supposed to have more influence as a male role model on your child than you.
Agreed.
And we could speak about the toxic baby mama situation and how women use child support as a way to get back at the baby fathers. I've seen that. I've seen situations where even with a friend of mine, every year the baby mother knows that he gets a raise from his job every year, and every year she takes him back and forth for more money. Wow. Not because she needs more money, but that is her way of taking a shot at him. That's the only way that she can hurt him. She uses the system to try to hurt him.
Yeah.
Wow. So he has to go through this perpetual drama with the baby mother, and then eventually the daughter got to be 18, and the daughter was going off to college, and the baby mother was like, well, we could just keep her on child support, and then I'll give her the money. And him out of pure spite said, yeah, we keep her on child support. So when the paperwork came, he checked no, and she called him up all mad, like, oh, why would you tell me this? He's like, you must have been crazy to think that I would give you money knowing that my daughter's grown and could ask me for anything she wants, and I'll just give it to her.
Right.
So I just think that the system has been set up to play men and women versus each other, and none of us benefit from it. The only people that benefit from it is the lawyers, the judges, the court bailiffs, everyone who's involved in the system. They benefit from it. So, it behooves us all just to get down together and start talking to one another so we can make situations equitable. Because I've seen where a guy was paying child support, he goes to court. He's paying child support out of his pocket, doing everything that he needs to do. So out of sheer spite, the baby mother puts him on child support, files the paperwork, he gets a lawyer, he goes to court, he ends up paying less than half of what he was paying. So now she's coming back to him trying to demand more, trying to ask for more money now because the court has given her less money. Right. He won't no. So what eventually happened was she ended up giving him custody. He's like, yo, just give me custody. Yeah. So I just think, like, when it comes to, I can only speak from the psychology phase of it because I don't deal with that in my own personal life. What I can say is that when I've learned when I go into situations where I'm dating women, I was only dealing with women that I thought who had marriage potential. I wasn't just dealing with any woman that I could just deal with. And I think a lot of times brothers get themselves in a situation where, they deal with women who, that they kind of know, well, I don't really like her like that, but I'll just have some fun. And then you end up having a situation where you have children. I'm big on looking at the female role models that woman has. Like, I love my mother-in-law. I love her to death. She is a beautiful, I'm telling you, she's a beautiful woman. And I can see where my wife gets some of her traits from. Mm-hmm. So, I would just say this once again, I don't have baby mama drama, and knock on wood. But these are things that you should be looking for in a mate. If you shouldn't be dealing with no woman that you don't feel as though is wifey material, you need to check her out. Check out her female role models. Do they have male role models in their life? Do they have husbands? Do they have long-term boyfriends? You need to check all this out because these are the women that she grew up around. So if she grew up around a whole bunch of toxic women, she may be acting nice for you now, but then when she gets in a situation where she feels empowered, that's when the toxic side starts to come out. That's when you be like, oh wow, well, you never showed me this side, but now she feels empowered. Now she feels as though she got you in a situation where she has leverage. So, you just have to be careful, once again, guys, and girls too.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get involved with men. Look at their male role models. Do they come from a line of brothers who just have a whole, they're not handling their responsibilities? Everybody has to need to just slow down, take their time, choose wisely, start picking better people.
Right.
Dating is not really for fun. It's really supposed to have a purpose. Start dating with a purpose. Stop dating for fun.
I just want to touch something, if I really can. Something interesting Kenneth has said. Well, we were talking about other men, being a role model for your child, and it touches me real close because I'm a man. Remember earlier I mentioned that I have 5 children with my wife. One of those children does not biologically belong to me, but that child I'll never call my stepson, or I'll just say that's my wife's son, because I've raised him since he was I taught him how to. I potty trained this boy, right? And what I'm saying is, like, I realize I love the fact that he's my child, and what happened was, his father happened to not be in the picture for whatever reason, and that's on him, right? But I was in a relationship with a woman that had this male child, this male that I was now raising, and there are circumstances, there are times where where another man will step up because somebody is not stepping up, and not that person won't eventually step up, but in this case, it took many years for my son's biological father to step into the picture, although he knew that there was somebody else help raising his child. And we got to commend men that are willing to do that, right? Because that's hard to do because of the aspect that you know that this is not your child and somebody else. Listen, and I'm in the same boat with Kenneth. I wouldn't want anybody else raising my child, right? But there are circumstances and there are times where that happens. And when you talk about being toxic now that can turn into a very toxic situation in and itself. So I get what Kenneth is saying. But at the same time, like, this young man, this great young man that I have raised, and I have a relationship, I ended up forming a sort of a little bond with his biological father after a while, because although there was animosity in the beginning, and there was hatred towards me in the beginning because he thought I was trying to, steal his son or whatever the case may be, turned into, as he grew older, a gratitude for this young man now having a role model, a man in his life that was able to mold him into a successful young man that he is today at 26 years old. So there are times where we as men have to step up sometimes if we're willing. So that's the thing. If we're willing, if we want to be with this woman, if we love this woman, if this woman has those characteristics as Kenneth was talking about, wife material, although she has a child, you have to remember now that you are now raising somebody else's child, and you now have to be even a stronger role model because you play a big part in the development of somebody that's not biologically linked to you, and that can become very toxic. But I just bless God that I was able to have the opportunity to do that, and that subject came up today, and that Kenneth brought up this great point, because like he said, I wouldn't want that for myself, for my children, but there are times where we as men are put in a position where we have to step up and become role models to those that are not biologically linked to us.
Right.
I think both of you brothers have made some good points. I would say that, to Kenneth's point, being mindful of who you're dating and dating with a purpose is important. It can help you along your path when it comes down to later on. If the event happens and you do have a child with somebody, it's going to alleviate a lot of pains when it comes to like being on the same page with somebody as a parent and co-parenting. But to Vince's point, I will say this: your wife is super supportive, and she's making some good points in this chat tonight. I'm seeing everything she's posting out here. My dad always told me growing up, when you're young and you're a young man, all you see is beauty. You know, we're driven by sight, and you know, it takes some of us men a while to develop enough wisdom to look for character and content more so than what we see visually from a woman, especially when you're in your 20s and things like that. You're developing, and they're developing as well. One thing my dad used to tell me, I'll be like, "Oh, I just met this beautiful girl." He said, "She may not be beautiful 10, 15 years from now. Go look at how her mother looks now."
Oh yeah.
He'll give me all these good. I'll tell her all these good traits. You know, and he said, "Go look at how she was raised. Like, put your energy into understanding what kind of household she grew up in. Single mother, two parents there. Do they have religious belief?" He said, "Don't come to me ever about how a woman looks. Looks fade. You got to have some content about yourself." And he said, "You're never going to settle down with somebody if they don't have good character and a good heart. Because at the end of the day, when you're old, gray, and ugly and wrinkled, and they're the same way, that's all you're going to have is a good relationship, you know, an acceptance of who you are as two individuals." So whether it's raising kids and going through a marriage together, it starts with your character and your heart. And so I think that when we talk about toxicity, there's so many contributing factors that can tie into it, whether you're, you know, I appreciate a podcast like this. And I know that, Miana, we got to move on to a different aspect of it. But I just want to say I really appreciate everybody's perspective on it.
Well, also, just to touch on something real quick. Women don't be toxic in a vacuum. No person is going to be toxic in a vacuum. And I think especially with women, I think a lot of women are toxic because they have toxic friends who co-sign on the toxic behavior. You know, it's just facts. It's just facts. They have people who co-sign on the toxic behavior because, you know, if you got, you know, I only be around friends who tell me raw, like tell me straight, like, "Hey, Ken, you know, you messing up and you need to fix that." That's the type of people I associate myself with, accountability, where if you got people and you live in the denial and the only people around you are the people living in denial, when somebody try to give it to you straight, you're not trying to hear that. So I think the socially, legally, morally, they've made it easier for people to be more toxic, rude, you know, all these behaviors that, you know, when we were growing up, we had our grandma and our grandma was like, "No, you don't act like that, sweetie. You don't act like that, sugar." You know, so, you know, you say you're a woman, but, you know, I'm looking back 50, 60 years ago, and I just know how strong my grandmother was and how strong, you know, my mom was before she went through her little thing. And I'm looking and I'm like, you know, being rude and, you know, just talking and just having the ability to talk, but you're really not saying nothing. I don't really see that as strength. Yeah. I see that just as attention grabbing.
Right, exactly. Definitely true. So as we come to a closing in our podcast, I like to, you know, talk about the healing process. If you guys have any advice for any kings that are out there that have experienced dealing with a mother who is toxic, or dealing with, you know, or if you wanted to elaborate on, you know, surviving a baby mother who's toxic, if you guys could just elaborate on that, you know, a little bit, just so that men can find healing where they are.
Yeah, I mean, I go first. I think the first and foremost, I mean, you know, we just the Bible says that we ought to forgive as God has forgiven us. And we've all, each and every one of our transgressions, for our attitude problems, for our nastiness, for you know, we've killed people with our tongues, and we've talked down to people. We've done everything possible that a human being can do that is not of God. I mean, to be honest with you, and for all that, we have been forgiven. I mean, me myself, I mean, you know, if you knew my story for real, you probably say, well, how could this man be forgiven? Why is he still, you know, walking the streets at 51 years old and not locked up, you know, for the rest of his life? Or, you know, and not, you know, why has he been blessed, or how he's been blessed? and it's because we have the Spirit of God in us to forgive, and I think we just need to forgive. I mean, we got to understand that all mothers, all people, all human beings go through their own trials, their own turmoils, their own situations. Nobody's perfect. Let he who's perfect cast the first stone. Right. So we just have to just be not be judgmental, and just be able to just forgive. And I think if you learn how to forgive and truly forgive, I mean, I'm not saying you're gonna forget, because there's a lot of things I haven't forgotten, but I sure have forgiven. And that just it makes the healing process easier when you can forgive, and you can really say, you know what, I forgive this person. I forgive my baby moms. I forgive my mother. I forgive, my aunt. I forgive my mother-in-law, my father-in-law. I just think it makes it that much easier to move on when we understand how to use the power of forgiveness.
Right, exactly.
I want to go ahead and say this. I've seen a lot of toxic behavior out of my mom and a lot of women I grew up around. However, they also taught me a lot of important life lessons that were positive. One life lesson that my mom taught me before I joined the military, she bought me a Bible, told me to read the book of Proverbs every day. That's it. She said, if you don't read any other book in the Bible for the rest of your life, read this one. And I read it every day in basic training throughout my career for 23 years in the Air Force. I always went back to one book. 66 books in the Bible, I read that one the most. And here's the deal. In Proverbs, I ran across a verse that said, lean not to your own understanding. And that's important to me, because what you see on social media, oftentimes everybody's trying to understand everything. There's a podcast for everything. There's a group for everything. Everybody's sharing perspectives. But in reality, we're not going to understand all the time the behaviors of everything around us in this world. We're not meant to understand everything. I trust in God that he's going to work behaviors out. The only thing I can control is my own actions. So if I got a toxic woman in front of me that is not trying to keep a child away from me, or if I got a toxic woman bringing the wrong type of men around my daughter and things like that, I cannot fully understand that woman, and I'm not going to spend 5-10 years trying to understand her. I'm going to pray about the situation, and as a man, I'm going to take responsibility and do what I'm supposed to do. By the time my daughter gets to a certain age, she's going to see the differences between her parents. She'll see the differences in understanding. She'll see that I don't want another man raising my daughter. My dad did everything he could to be there and provide a good example. But a lot of men these days put so much energy in hating their baby mothers for all their toxicity and everything they don't understand. You're never going to understand somebody that's so different than you, them different backgrounds and things like that. And I think we put our energy sometimes in the wrong area. I don't try to understand dysfunctional people. I don't do that. I can only control being the best dad I could possibly be.
Right.
Period, point blank. And I think a lot of men should understand that, like, you may hate your baby mama for whatever reason, and whatever she did to you, and she's trying to take you to court, she's trying to do this, and every time you get a pay raise, she's trying to take more money from you.
Right.
You can only control your own actions. Lawyer up, fight what she's doing, but at the end of the day, your child's gonna see everything you're doing, and everything. If you internally, if you really got that much disgust and hate for a woman, your child is gonna see it in some kind of way. She's gonna see it. He or she is gonna see how you internally feel. It's gonna manifest in some kind of way, shape, or form. I personally don't try to walk this earth with that type of anger inside of me. I gotta forgive and just control my actions and pray about it and leave it alone.
In the immortal words of DMX, you have to trust people to be who they show you are, who they are. And for me, the healing process started when I stopped having expectations of people that were unrealistic for who they are. The healing process for me is when I take accountability for not what has been done for me, but how I react to what has been done to me going forward. The healing process for me is a self-evaluation on who I am, how I interact with myself, how I interact with the people who are in my life, and how I interact with those I choose to let into my life. Bad things happen to good people. And you could sit around and you could dwell on it, you could play the victim, or you could take control of what you can take control of. You can't control people. You can't control how they think. You can't control what they do. You can only control yourself. And when people say, well, that person made me mad. No, you choose to be mad. You chose to be angry. You control your emotions and your feelings and how you interact with everybody else in life. So I just refuse to let, the healing process for me is, I refuse to let anybody have a trigger that they can pull to get me to have a reaction that they so desire. I control the way I think. I control the way I feel. I control the way I act. I can't control how you act, but I can control the way I react towards you. And I can learn to love some loved ones from a distance.
Right.
I can learn to love people from a distance. I can learn to not let people who don't deserve to have access to my time, to my personal space, to just interact with them. I can learn to love them from a distance, whether they be family members, friends, or whomever. I just learned the healing process for me is for me to take control of how I interact in the world and to not give people who do not deserve the right to have access to my feelings and emotions and access to me. So that's just it. You have to take personal control of your situation and understand that there's no one's to blame for how you choose to react to somebody but you.
Right. Only thing I'm gonna say, and this is real quick, Angie has been hitting on this when in the chat room, just letting everybody know it. We should also be hold ourselves accountable enough to go to therapy.
Facts.
See people like Kenneth.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So just so really quickly, while we're coming to an end, if you guys want to share your social media and how people can support and contact you, please do that quickly now. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm on Facebook. It's Kenneth Lee Bell. You'll see my profile picture. On Instagram is Big Ken Lee on Instagram, and my inbox is always open.
My page is Marlon D. Hackett on Facebook. Social media, I've just shrunk my profile quite a bit on my social media platform. I was really out there with a lot of content about financial literacy, but Instagram, I'm just SWAT, SWAT _ Scorpio 3000.
Awesome. Thank you, Victor.
I think my Facebook is Vic Santiago, just VIC Santiago. I don't really know. And my Instagram, you got me on that one. I have one. I just don't know what it is. So, I mean, if you just, I don't know. I'll probably put it on the live.
We'll put it in the comments later.
I'll put it on the comment later, but I really don't have much social media.
All right, awesome. Well, this is the conclusion of Conversations with Kings, our very first episode. Congratulations to you guys for being on the first episode. I'm so proud of you. And I wanted to encourage you, Kings. Basically, you are amazing. You are one in all of the world. You're not one in a million. So walk with your head high and always remember that. So everybody that was watching, thank you. Check you guys later.
Appreciate you.